How do you top your love for your cat? With a cascade of decadent savory gravy over a mouth-watering mousse pâté. Fancy Feast gems. 2 gourmet pâtés in one convenient pack. Simply peel and plate to reveal a pyramid shape that makes eating delightful and pamper her with an experience as extraordinary as she is. Turn the everyday into the extraordinary with Fancy Feast gems.
Vitamin Water Zero Sugar has great taste, zero BS, and obviously zero sugar. For those with zero room in their calendar. Zero patience for slow walkers. Those who get 0 hours of sleep on a Saturday night. Have zero filter, zero given, and zero interest in grabbing a plain, boring water. Grab a delicious Vitamin Water Zero Sugar today.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
Welcome to the New Books Network.
I'm Chris Holmes, and this is Burned by Books. Here you'll find interviews with writers you already love, like Jennifer Egan and Rebecca Mackay, mixed in with up-and-coming voices like Alexandra Kleeman and Rumaan Alam. You'll find us wherever you listen to podcasts, but check out previous episodes at burnedbybooks.com and on Instagram and Twitter at burnedbybooks. Let's start the show. The protagonist of Kate Folk's debut novel, Sky Daddy, is fixated on plane crashes. But Linda isn't running in terror from the crash. She is pursuing it like a lover. Indeed, her life goal is to find the plane on which she had a near-death experience as a child and marry it. By marry, she means becoming permanently joined with the plane in a deadly crash, signifying its love for her. All very normal and straightforward. Linda's day job as a content moderator of videos for a tech company might sound horrible. The constant proximity to the worst behavior and online instincts of her fellow humans. But for Linda, it passes over her as lightly as the rest of the non-aviation world. Attempts at dating pilots and manifesting her machine love via a vision board ladies group go sideways. But nothing can dissuade her from seeking out her airplane lover. A riotously funny take on the very real crises of loneliness and alienation in America, Sky Daddy introduces us to a woman on the verge, whose oddities endear us to her and ask us to look more carefully at what gets to pass as normal in an adult life when all of us are in some manner chasing love and chasing death. Kate Folk is the author of the novel Sky Daddy and the short story collection Out There. Her short fiction and essays have appeared in The New Yorker, N+1, The New York Times, Granta, and the Baffler, among other venues. A former Stegner Fellow, she's also received fellowships and residencies from MacDowell, the Headlands Center for the Arts, and Willapa Bay AiR. She lives in San Francisco. Welcome, Kate Folk, to Burned by Books.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So the first question, of course, has to be why? Why a novel concerned with the sexual obsession with planes? And the immediate follow-up to that is, how did you convince your agent and Random House to bite?
Yeah, I mean, that part actually wasn't as difficult as I feared it might be. So I already had a deal for the novel. Like, I got a 2-book deal for the collection and then a novel to be written. So I'd sort of casually pitched it to my editor way back in like 2020 when I got the deal for Out There, and she said that sounded fine, whatever. And then I spent, writing it.
Quite
And
the quite
I don't know if that's what. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's what she said. It's just like, okay, sounds good. And then, yeah, but then I spent, 3 more years writing it, and yeah. But then when I showed it to her, she loved it, and if anything, wanted it to be even weirder and to kind of push into the erotics of Linda's activities with planes. I think, yeah, where it came from, I mean, I think that I've always been fascinated by planes and afraid of flying too, and just thought of it as this incredible thing that we get to do. That also, I mean, I always feel very in touch with my own mortality when I'm on a flight, especially if there's turbulence, and it's just this kind of act of surrender boarding a flight because whatever happens next, it's really out of my control, which most of life is. But on a plane, I think that's really stark. So I thought that was just a fascinating kind of world to explore in a novel. And then through this character who has this very singular obsession and romantic fixation on planes, I thought would be really fascinating.
Yeah, and she's now that you're saying that, it strikes me that she's surrounded by people who want an absolute ironclad grip on what is happening next in their life. They want to be able to define it within an inch of its life, and that just goes contrary to what life actually offers us, which is probably something closer to turbulence on an airplane. Is that was that on your mind, especially with the secondary characters?
Yeah, definitely. I think, because a big part of kind of the inciting incident of the novel is that Linda goes to this vision board brunch that she's invited to by her coworker, who she really looks up to and thinks of as this like pinnacle of being a normal person, and especially a normal woman who always knows what to do. And yeah, so, at the vision board brunch, it is like this promise that anything you put on the vision board will be manifested in reality, and that, yeah, kind of like this idea that we can harness the universe's power to manifest whatever we want in life. And that's definitely a tension in the novel between that idea of like controlling our destiny versus not actually having any control over our destiny. And I think it's like an interesting way that contemporary culture, a lot of people seem to be like thinking about these ways to like optimize every part of their life. And especially in the Bay Area where the book is set and where I live, it's like there's this idea that everything can be kind of streamlined and made more productive, and maybe like fate can even be reduced to that same kind of thing of like a workout regimen or something. And so yeah, the other
If you
women
do the right yoga, you don't have to worry about fate.
right, and there is this kind of like moralistic underpinning to it too, that it's like, oh, if you're not getting what you want out of life, it's because you're not like asking the right way, or you're not doing the right rituals, or you don't actually want it enough. And this idea of this like purity of thinking that can create things in the real world. And I think there's something just like so fascinating about that. And the other women at the vision board brunch are very like modest in their goals that they present on their vision boards. And Linda's the only one who is kind of willing to really go there with her darkest desire, putting it on the board. Because for Linda, it's like, a plane crash is such a statistical anomaly. It's like her only recourse is, the universe's will and the idea of fate, that she could be this outlier. So
And it is that sort of sense of her, her darkest interior desire, which for her is not dark at all. It's a a fundamental and true desire for what she wants as the like culmination of her life. But I think that this is a book that for me could only be a first person narration, because it allows us a closeness to an interior monologue that in other narrative voices might alienate the reader, but instead we sort of love her peculiarity, and I couldn't help feeling that she was much like a stranger in a strange land, capable of seeing culture as an outsider and allowing us to see what might be cued as normal in a new light. Do you think of her at all as kind of an alien, or do you imagine that we are all so peculiar and would appear alien if someone could inhabit our interior life?
yeah, I mean, I think a little of both. Like that was definitely such a fun part of writing this character. And like one of the main challenges of the premise, I think, was to take a character who has this really outlandish desire and make her feel credible and like a real person, and even relatable in a surprising way. One book I was thinking about as I was writing was Convenience Store Woman by Siapa
Oh,
Murata,
yeah.
and I think she writes a lot of characters like that, right, who are a little bit alien and yeah, this sort of like outsider perspective on these like social customs that are kind of taken for granted, but then why should they be really when you think about it, right? And yeah, and I love characters like that kind of defamiliarize these customs that feel so ambient normally. But yeah, I feel like the ironic thing throughout the book is that it's like these other characters that Linda sees as just, normal compared to her turn out to also be deeply weird and troubled and, kind of lost and struggling to figure out who they are and what they want. I think that is like ultimately in the book. Yeah, so I feel like, that is like something that comes across through the book, like as she gets closer to these other characters, like her coworker Karina and then Dave, who's sort of her boss. She thinks that she has to like defend her own weirdness against them and like, pretend to be normal, but actually, they at the same time they're revealing themselves to be, just as weird as Linda in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Sky Daddy is incredibly funny. I haven't laughed out loud this much while reading in quite some time. In fact, I annoyed the hell out of my son by constantly reading him pieces of a book that was totally out of context for him. But I was wondering if you would read a section for us, one of many that I love that are vision board related. And this would be the first time that Linda shares her vision board, which, as you say, is so outlandish and kind of an extravagant wish compared to, the other women who wish for things like being more at peace for themselves or with themselves, or asking for a promotion, or getting their boyfriend to ask them to marry them.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Conditions were more awkward than I could have imagined. Yet somehow, the way the mood had tilted into conflict, fraught with relational context of which I was ignorant, felt freeing. I would throw myself on the chopping block for Karina's sake. I stood before the window and unrolled my board. The women's eyes scanned the images. I couldn't bear to look at my board, though I'd memorized its layout. The best photos I'd procured of planes shot from various angles, their wings and faces, and one naughty landing gear shot. The pilots, Guillaume Fleury. Stacy was the first to speak. Wow, look at all those planes, she said. I always thought pilots were kind of sexy, Judy said. Esme stood, glass in hand, and scrutinized my board at closer range. Are you thinking of a career change, Linda? She asked. No, I want to marry a pilot, I said. Now that I'm in my 30s, I figure it's time to get married. The women crouched one by one to examine my board. They seemed delighted, as though it were the morbid artwork of a child. Stacy curled up on the floor at my feet. Your board is fucking amazing, Linda, she said. She seemed a little drunk. Pilots are gone a lot of the time, Morgan said, as she settled back onto the couch. That's true, Esme said. I've heard they have high divorce rates. I don't think it has to be a pilot, Karina said. That's just an example, a guy with a good job, right, Linda? I nodded, grateful she'd translated my board into acceptable terms. Who's that? Stacy asked, reaching up to tap Guillaume Fleury's stoic face. That's Guillaume Fleury, the CEO of Airbus, I said, feeling insulted on Fleury's behalf that these women didn't recognize him and that Stacy had poked him. So you want to marry a CEO? Morgan said. I sensed she was mocking me, but I pretended not to notice. Oh, I don't want to marry him, I said. He's pretty old, and I think he lives in Europe anyway. Why does she have to date a CEO? Esme said to Morgan. She could be one herself. I nodded again, or perhaps I'd never stopped nodding. I'd like to be the boss, I said, hoping this would please them. Fuck yeah, Stacy said. And what did the planes signify? Karina asked. I dreaded this question, especially from Karina, as I worried the plane imagery would trigger her phobia. Travel, I said. I'd like to travel more. Karina nodded, and I knew I'd passed an important test. Next time, you might want to add some images from particular destinations, Esme said. The more precisely you can express your vision, the better. Next time, I couldn't believe it. They seemed to like me in spite of my board, which was so different from theirs. I'd shown them a sliver of my true self, and that accepted at least this partial measure of me. I felt an overwhelming affection for these women, recalling those teen girls from my moderation queue who'd harassed their friend, calling her a cum dumpster. Perhaps I'd finally been inducted into a similar sorority. I decided to wrap things up before they asked me a question I didn't know how to answer. I rolled up my board, and they applauded. Karina crossed the room and hugged me. I breathed in the familiar smell of her perfume, along with the waxy scent of her scalp. "One more thing," she said. "That was a great first effort, and I really like the unified theme. But for your next board, you might try not leaning so heavily on one type of image. You don't want the universe to think you're obsessed with planes." Everyone laughed, and I laughed along with them, while inwardly I prayed the universe was canny enough to decipher my board's coded meaning. We stood in joined hands for the final stage of the ceremony. Esme led us through a manifestation mantra she'd learned at a corporate retreat. "Universe, empower me to become the best version of myself in accordance with your infinite wisdom."
Hmm. Thank you so much. So these vision board meetings are some of the funniest moments in a very funny novel, but they do, I think, some of the best work of representing how odd life in late capitalism is, with its fetishes for signals of wealth and well-being, a combination of posed serenity and a death drive towards wealth and success at all costs. It strikes me that if an alien landed in this group, they might find the boards of these other women just as strange and unnerving as Linda's plane fantasy. And even, as you were finishing, I was fixating on the fact that even the mantra, the supposed spiritual core of this, is from a corporate retreat. So could you talk a little bit about capitalism and its death drive, and the way in which these other vision boards are upsetting in their own way?
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that, it's like the other boards, it just shows how the other women are kind of locked into this script for what they're supposed to want from life. And even it's like that one woman, the first woman who goes, like, she's divided her board into quadrants. And so there's like professional life and personal life and exercise. And it's all like very regimented in a way that feels like, all the characters are these like cogs in this machine. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's I feel like that's sort of what Linda is seeking to transcend through her communion with planes. It's like the plane is this access point to the sublime, into something beyond ordinary experience, and something that can't be, can't be sort of put into a box by capitalism and consumerism, because it's like the danger and potential risk of flying is something that like connects people to like what we really are, which is just like vulnerable animals, who are subject to natural forces. And so yeah, I feel like for Linda it is a way of kind of breaking out of that script. And in the meantime, Linda has this job as a content moderator where she moderates comments on a video sharing platform. And all the other women look down on that job and think it sounds terrible, but Linda actually really enjoys it and is really good at it, which I think also says something. It's like, in a way, she's this perfect cog in this machine to do this like terrible work cleaning the internet for everyone else. And so she's sort of like a creature of all of those forces at the same time.
That comment about her sort of being the perfect cog for this, really terrible job of cleaning the internet, it really does connect this to convenience store woman so nicely, but really in conversation. And I am really interested in her job. I mean, you're in San Francisco, so you're tech central there, but it's interesting because you've got a company that's a video hosting company that has this content moderation group. And while Linda's not saddled with porn or violence, which are two of the work teams in that group, she has to wade through enormous quantities of offensive language and really kind of brutal treatment of people to others. And her top performance is really based on, as you say, on being able to be a cog. And it's not so much that I'd say it's not so much that she cleans the internet totally, but she is able to decide what the corporation or the corporate body thinks is cleaning it. And so I sort of have two questions about this. So one is, how does this help us understand the way that Linda thinks and engages with the world? But also, content moderation may in fact becoming a thing of the past in an age of, Trump's America and omnipresent spectacle. So I'm also wondering whether you think content moderation will become an artifact of the past.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm probably not the right person to speak to that because I don't really know the insider stuff of the industry at all. But I mean, it seems to me that, yeah, like the the social media platforms kind of moving away from caring about moderation in the first place, and
Yeah.
also, I think also it'll probably be increasingly automated as the AI gets
True, yeah.
better, which is part of the book too, right? Like Linda's job basically is to train the AI that's going to replace her and put her out of a job, which everyone she works with like knows and is just kind of fatalistic about, like, oh, yeah, whatever. So that's another aspect of, Linda's kind of being paid just to corroborate what the machine says and to put a final like human stamp on it. But but yeah, I think that, and in the case of content moderation, I don't know, like I don't like AI for so many reasons, but in this case, maybe it is good to have AI do it rather than underpaid workers that have to absorb that. I don't know, but
Yeah, we'll let the machine absorb the terror of
yeah,
human interiority.
yeah, right.
Jen has ordered a decadent seafood tower, king crab legs, lobster tails, and a waterfall of caviar. Pricey? You bet. But Jen worked with Empower on her savings and investment strategy and planned for splurges like these. She got good at money, so she can be a little bad. Ooh, champagne. Empower. Invest well, live a little. Start today at empower.com.
Past performance is not indicative of future returns. Investing involves risk. You may lose money. Advisory services are provided for a fee by Empower Advisory Group, LLC, EAG, a registered investment advisor with the Securities and Exchange Commission. OMG, those shrimps are really jumbo.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Not all meals are created equal. For instance, breakfast has the spicy egg McMuffin for a limited time, and lunch doesn't. McDonald's breakfast comes first. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
But yeah, I think the what it says about Linda is that she's this very open character. Like because she feels so different and she has this, it's like she thinks of her own life as temporary and her conditions are just temporary. So she doesn't really mind, like working at this place other people think is terrible, or living in this windowless room that she rents from a family that kind of hates her. Because to her, it's all
Well, they
just,
don't hate her as long as she's utterly silent, has no
Yeah.
guests, and just like keeps to herself in her windowless room.
right. Yeah. Yeah, they want her to be, I think she says, like the ghost of a tenant, like the perfect tenant who doesn't exist basically, and just whose bank account automatically deposits rent each month, which I feel like is what all landlords want. But yeah, because of that, because of how she takes this like anthropological view of everything she does, I think that makes her perfectly suited to this work because she's not personally offended by any of the language or any of the terrible things people say in the comments. She just is able to fully align herself with like the terms and conditions and the standards of the company because she doesn't really have any standards of her own. Like she's just pretty much, open to whatever. And I think that's also like an endearing quality because it makes her very non-judgmental of like other people in her life, like Karina, Karina's relationship problems or whatever. Linda's kind of just like very open to whatever Karina says to her and doesn't judge other people
Mm-hmm.
as others might. So
Yeah, and that gets me to a question and a point what I wanted to make about the novel and why it's funny and it has this sort of like interesting absurdity to it, but it's incredibly deeply emotional and affecting, and I think that comes out of her, as you say, Linda's deep openness, and that openness allows her to, I think, understand how loneliness and friendship are these sort of key things in the world. And for all of its absurdity, it's a novel that takes seriously that the pain and isolation of contemporary life. and our need for connection to others. Linda's friend Karina is, despite Linda's horniness for aviation, the most important relationship in her life. The development of that friendship through real betrayal and self-doubt carries powerful emotion in the novel. How do you read their friendship, especially in the context of the death drive inherent to Linda's quest for the white whale of the skies?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's such a powerful type of friendship. I mean, like, I feel like friendship between women is just like so fraught and can really feel like the primary relationships. And I mean, I feel like that's kind of how I feel, like looking back at past relationships, past romantic relationships I've had with men sort of are one thing, but then I feel like equally as like powerful in my memory are these like friendships I've had with other women and girls when I was younger, and these like, rifts in the friendships and conflicts and fallings out that I still am like, well, what happened with that? And it's kind of haunts me. And even thinking back to like, when I was a kid and felt like a misfit and, like a weird kid and just looked up to these like popular girls who I kind of like despised but was in awe of. Like,
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
like gods or something. And I think, Linda had the same experience of being kind of a weird kid, and obviously she had this fixation on planes even at that early age. And so to her, I think Karina represents all of that. She represents this ultimate like cool girl who just like knows how to do everything, knows how to like how to dress and how to style her hair and wear makeup and all of that. And that's like so powerful to Linda, like much more meaningful than any like romantic relationship she would have with a person, because she's not interested in that. But yeah, I think Linda is like a very lonely person. And even though she, I didn't want the book to kind of normalize her by the end, or to have her, realize like, oh, this is just like the obsession with planes is just a cover for this other thing, and then she gets over it. I wanted her to remain like resolute in, her primary fascination with the planes, but at the same time, I think she becomes more open throughout the book to particularly the friendship with Karina, and the idea that maybe she could open herself up to another person and be seen and accepted, and that is kind of like what she's wanted all along and never thought was possible, because early attempts to maybe reveal her obsession with planes were met with derision, like from her mom and that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think there is like this deep need, obviously, for real connection, especially when we live in this time when everything is so mediated by technology and everyone's so busy, and it feels like that's kind of what we all are looking for in various ways.
Yeah, and I really do appreciate the fact that the novel doesn't dissolve her drive for that kind of joinder with the plane, and that it can be both and. She can recognize her need and desire for friendship with Karina and perhaps others, but also still be connected to this true, if dark, passion of hers. And that leads me to a novel of a true and dark passion that you cite as directly as in conversation, and that's Moby Dick, which is at least lightly an intertext for Sky Daddy. Indeed, the novel opens up Call Me Linda, and Linda's lifelong obsession with a huge white plane feels quite whalish. Melville's great opus notoriously contains some of everything. But how specifically do you see the two novels in conversation?
Yeah, I mean, so I had the idea first, and I was trying to write it, in a more just straightforward contemporary way, and it was hard to find my way into the character in that way, because I feel like for someone with such a like idiosyncratic way of seeing the world and like and her place in it just didn't seem quite right to have it be kind of, just like middle brow contemporary prose or whatever. And so I happened to start rereading Moby Dick in the process of writing a first draft, and I was just so taken by the language and the voice of Ishmael, and yeah, how Melville's like mixing all these different registers, and also there were just like thematically, it seemed like there were these parallels that I wouldn't have expected. I love how the book how Moby Dick begins, kind of taking us by the hand and leading us on this great adventure of, like going off to sea. And that felt similar to what I wanted for Linda, which was this like joy and, awe at being able to take to the sky on a plane and not understanding why everyone else doesn't feel the same way she does. And yeah, the fact that, it's a white whale in Moby Dick that Ahab is obsessed with, and planes are like the white whales of the sky. And there seemed like a connection there, even a connection with, oil and how planes run on oil, jet fuel, and are kind of symbols of carbon output and something that probably won't be sustainable long term. And the whales were hunted for their oil, and they both seem like symbols also of humankind's hubris in thinking that we can dominate the natural world and bend it to our will indefinitely. And so all of those things seemed like they were there. And then but I was most taken by the voice and like the way that Melville anthropomorphizes the whales and talks about them as like gentlemen and fellows. And I thought that was like so charming and funny. And so that definitely is something that made it into Sky Daddy, the way that Linda talks about planes. So yeah, and it was mostly on the level of voice then, at least what ended up as the final version, because I worked for a while kind of using Moby Dick as a scaffold, and partly just as a way to get through a first draft, because I find it really hard to write a first draft and to figure out like the possibilities for the story and to just keep writing. So that was a way to do it, to just like keep my nerve up. But then at a certain point, it has to be its own book, and it's a book of its own time, as Moby Dick was of its time. And so it couldn't be just like mapped onto the other book. So I rewrote it then, but it feels like the DNA of Ishmael's voice and some of those thematic things are still present. And yeah, I was thinking about Karina as like a Queequeg character.
I was just gonna ask. Yeah.
Yeah, because that friendship between Ishmael and Queequeg is so like sweet in Moby Dick, I feel, and also of course homoerotic, and I feel like there's like a strain of that too in Linda and Karina's relationship, and they wind up sleeping in the same bed at a point, and it is a platonic relationship, but there's just this like real intimacy to it as well that I hope to capture.
Yeah, no, you absolutely, well, and I won't say anything about it, but the last scene is incredibly intimate, even though it is not necessarily sexual.
Mm-hmm.
Before I let you go, Kate, I'd love to know a little bit about what you've been reading and loving recently, and maybe some recommendations you have for my listeners.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. There's this novel I love by Don Carpenter, Hard Rain Falling. I don't know if you've read that. It's a beautiful novel. It's just so well written. I love that novel. I would like to.
When was it published?
Oh, it was 1966.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's a really beautiful novel. A lot of it's set in San Francisco, and I've been reading. I read Katie Kitamura's Audition. I thought was a really interesting book. Came out the same day as my book, so it was very on my radar.
Yeah,
And
I really liked it.
yeah. I think she's such an interesting writer. And then I've been rereading my friend Liddy Conklin's novel Songs of No Provenance, which is an amazing novel about music, actually, and about a musician who is kind of like on the outskirts of queer identity and has this particular like sexual fixation that makes her an outsider, that has led her to do this kind of cancelable thing on stage that she's then running from. But it's just such a fascinating novel about what it means to be an artist and what it means to have ambition, how that can be poisonous, and appropriation and all these different things. So I'm excited for that one. It just came out a few
Yeah, it
weeks ago.
sounds like it's in conversation with your book quite a bit.
Yeah, we were in the Stegner program together, so we read each other's books while we were writing them. I was thinking that too as I've been rereading it. It does seem, because there's also a kind of a pivotal friendship at the core of it. So it definitely feels like the two books are in conversation.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely seek it out. But I want to highly recommend for my listeners Sky Daddy by Kate Folk. which is so funny and wonderfully unhinged, but also deeply empathetic and a powerful testament to outsiders and the vision that they bring to the ways in which we live with one another. And it was a real treat to get to talk to you about it, Kate.
Yeah, likewise. I loved talking. This was great.
Thank you so much. Well, that's all for me for now. My thanks to Kate Folk for coming on to talk about her debut novel, Sky Daddy. You can find links to purchase Sky Daddy and all of Kate's recommended books at the website, burnedbybooks.com. There you'll find all of our previous episodes, links to buy a podcast t-shirt, and ways to get in contact. As you listen, take a moment to rate the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Until then, this has been Burned by Books.